Pattern Work 101. I'll start with a basic 2-dart sloper or block. I'm going to move the shoulder dart to a side bust. So mark the location for the new dart, and then trace from that point around the block to the first dart leg that is moving. Mark the legs for the waist dart, as that one will stay. Pivot at the apex and trace from the new dart point around to the closed shoulder dart. Now the details. I'm moving the waist dart apex what would be 1/2 inch on a full-size pattern. I don't want torpedo tatas. When I draw the dart legs, I curve them out slightly, which will result in a curved in or concave dart when sewn. I'll move the bust dart apex the same 1/2 inch on a full-scale pattern, and this time I will curve the dart legs in slightly. The curved dart legs result in a dart at the waist that will tuck in against the torso and under the bust, and the bust dart will curve over the fullness of the bust. Add the seam allowance of 1/2 inch. Half an inch full scale. And cut it out. The neck seam allowance would be a 1/4 inch on a full scale, but I'm just not going there at this size. The waist dart was already shaped on the sloper, so I can just follow that and cut it right out. For the new dart, crease one leg, I went with the bottom one, and fold the dart closed, cupping the pattern piece as if it were going over the bust. I cupped mine for a caved-in tata, but it still works. Now I can cut the seam allowance to reveal the dart shape. Add the gray line. Label, and done. Pattern Work 101. Pivoting a dart to a new location. In this case, we're going to keep the waist dart and pivot the shoulder dart into the Armscye. Mark the new location in the Armscye and trace all the way around to the first leg of the shoulder dart, making sure to still mark the dart legs for the waist dart since we're keeping it. Pivot at the apex to close the shoulder dart, and then trace from the new position on the armscye around to the closed dart. Time for details. Remembering to move the dart apex away from the actual bust apex. It would be 1/2 inch on a full size. Draw in the dart legs, a little bit of a curve so that it will tuck in against the torso. And again, remembering to move the dart apex away from the pattern apex. We do not want torpedo tatas. But for some reason, my brain forgets, often. The new dart legs, this time curving in so that the dart will curve over the fullness of the bust. Add seam allowance everywhere but the center front, which would mean this pattern would be cut on the fold, or of course, better, cut as a full pattern. And the seam allowance at the neck would be 1/4 inch. But I'm not doing a 1/16 for this. It's practice. I can cut the waist seam allowance because that's from the block, so it's already shaped. Crease the bottom dart leg, fold the dart closed. Cup the paper. Yes, mine is cupping in again. It's just the way I roll. And now you can cut out the Armscye seam allowance, which will show the new shape of the dart. Remember to get in the habit of adding the grain line. And the habit of labeling. Trust me, this will save you later. Another pivot to move a dart. Starting with the basic 2-dart sloper or block, we're going to move the shoulder dart to the neckline. So mark the new location on the neck, trace around the block until you reach the first leg of the shoulder dart. Make sure you mark the legs for the waist dart as we're keeping that. Now pivot the shoulder dart closed, which will open the new space on the neckline. Trace that little piece of the block from the shoulder to the neckline mark. And ta-da, you now have a gap in your neckline. Remembering to shift the dart apex away from the actual bust apex so that you don't have pointy boobs, and a little bit of a curve on these dart legs so that the dart will be concave and curve in against the body under the bust. Once again, moving the apex away from the sloper apex. And our new dart legs. Add seam allowance, round the bodice. We will skip the center front, as that pattern piece would be cut on the fold, or better, a full pattern piece. Cut it out, skipping the new dart for the moment so that we can come back and shape the dart legs in the seam allowance. It's safe to cut the waist dart shape, as that was already on the block.
Because they refer to something as the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of America, and they won't accept Google Maps has changed it. Somebody else.
Crease the dart leg closest to the center front.
But you're not doing anything to restrict the press. Right?
And then fold to close the dart and cup the pattern piece.
I want to go on 2 rants.
Yes.
Now you can cut out the neckline seam allowance, giving you the new dart leg shape in the seam allowance.
Even if you're not working the job anymore, where the fuck are you?
Really quiet. You're trying not to be killed. Thrown in jail. Save their butt.
Add the grain line.
He's a brave little kitty, isn't he?
Mark your notches.
Is that because you're down here?
Probably.
You can run home to mama.
Go back to your previous pattern piece that you forgot to mark your notches on. And realize later that you never labeled the pattern piece, and do that. Pivoting a dart and creating shearing. Mark the location for the dart and trace from that point around the block to the first leg of the shoulder dart. Pivot at the bust apex to close the shoulder dart and trace from the now closed shoulder dart to the new dart location in the neckline. Measure what would be 1.5 inches on a full-scale pattern away from the dart legs on the waistline, and notch to mark for the shearing. Move the new dart apex away from the sloper apex and draw in the dart legs. Add the grain line. Half-inch seam allowance all around the bodice except for the center front, which would be on the fold or a full pattern, and the neckline, which would be 1/4 inch on a full-size pattern. And when you get to the waistline seam allowance, remember that you did not adjust the line of the waistline for making it shearing rather than a dart. Cut out the pattern piece all around, leaving excess around the new dart. Cutting the center front line exactly on the line because that would again be on the fold or a full pattern. Crease the dart leg closest to the center front. Fold the dart to close it and cup the paper. Now you can cut out the neckline seam allowance, giving you the new shaped dart legs. And please remember to add the label so you know what you are doing. Pattern Work 101. Starting with the basic 2-dart block, mark a space in the neckline for the new location of the fullness. Trace all the way around the block to the first leg of the shoulder dart. Pivot at the bust apex and trace from the closed shoulder dart to the new mark on the neckline. Move the waist dart apex away from the apex on the block and draw in your new shaped dart legs.
That's what we're gonna do.
Mark the neck 2 inches in from the shoulder seam and notch for the shearing. Draw in a new neckline curve. Add 1/2 inch seam allowance all around the bodice, excluding the center front. And of course, the neckline would be 1/4 inch. Notch the dart legs at the waist. Add in the all-important grain line. Cut out the pattern piece. And the all-important label. Again, starting with the basic 2-dart sloper. Pick a spot on the center front line below the bust apex and trace from there all the way around to the beginning of the shoulder dart. Pivot to close the dart and trace the remaining shoulder, neckline, and center front down to the mark. We're keeping the waist dart, so drop the apex and then draw in your dart legs. Once again, I'm doing curved so that the dart will be concave and tuck in under the bust against the torso. Draw in the dart legs for the new dart on the center front line. Go ahead and add the seam allowance all around the bodice. For this version, you do need seam allowance on the center front. Add the grain line above the bust apex.
That was a bad curve.
Cut the pattern out. Leave excess on the center front by the new dart so we can shape the legs. Crease the bottom dart leg and then fold to close and cup the paper. Now you can cut out the center front seam allowance, and that will give us the dart legs shape in the seam allowance.
All right, two dart.
And remember to label the pattern.